I've been finding a lot of similarities when it comes to the themes of Aleister Crowley and Donald Trump, particularly when it comes to Crowley's writings about Babylon. Now, as we know, Trump is running for president right now. As of lately, Trump has been declared to have more power than a king himself, which was what Crowley in a way was trying to obtain through OTO, which if you don't know is Ordo Templi Orientis, a magical organization that he helped found. And so most people have seen by now that Sexy Red has been given to America as this manifestation of the Whore of Babylon, which is why you see her on major stages when it comes to Republican views, being pushed heavily, whether you see her at a country music concert, a WWE show. It's quite obvious why her image is being used this way. And so if you have read about Crowley's work at all, a lot of it speaks of the Scarlet Woman, or the Whore of Babylon that they speak about in the Book of Revelation. Now, first I want to touch on something that I talked about a while back, which was that the new Apple AI logo is an inverted version of the Seal of Babylon that is illustrated in Crowley's works, but I don't know that people really get why. Yesterday I mentioned how apple pie in the United States is a symbol of patriotism. And when we're talking about the company Apple, which is said to be a manifestation of the beast or of all light knowledge, and then you combine that with pi, which is an irrational constant number that has no beginning or end, you can see why these two might have a little bit in common. See, the whole thing with Crowley was through the great work, he was attempting to become godlike, but never finished that work. And if you just want a general vague definition of what the great work was, it was to create the Philosopher's Stone. I've shown before through several videos how the story of the Scarlet Witch, which you can find in Marvel movies with Wanda Maximoff, can be seen mirrored in a lot of Sexy Red and the music videos she's been in, particularly one that I've touched on many times before, which was the Rich Baby Daddy video. In the Rich Baby Daddy video, Sexy gives birth to a baby with Drake, who many times I've mentioned calls himself Osiris, who, as you can see here, is who Aleister Crowley was trying to portray. I've also shown the connections between people trying to utilize the Osiris energy, such as Elon Musk with X, SpaceLink, and all his other businesses. You start to see the parallels between the stories because in this magical order Crowley was in, they were practicing the rites of Isis and Osiris, which are mirrored in Crowley's book, The Vision and the Voice, like we have Vision and Wanda. And if you follow the Egyptian mythological stories about Isis raising Osiris from the dead so that he could become the god Horus, you can see how the story starts to tie together. But with Crowley never finishing this work, he never squared the circle. Now, squaring the circle was the definition of bringing two things together that really weren't supposed to be together. And here you see the symbol that is used in Harry Potter for the Resurrection Stone. Now, where does Trump fall into all of this, you say? Well, Trump being this want-to-be leader of America, first of all, I take into little details such as the fact that he's orange. And we've had a lot of codes already with orange is the new black, or Elon Musk orange is the new lemon, which denotes a storyline about alkaline versus acidity, but also the connection to The Simpsons and the entire storyline of Homer and the Odyssey. A lot of this is rooted in the family dynamic and the splitting of the nuclear family, which are themes that we can see in the show WandaVision, as well as all the recent back and forth in the rap world. Now, remember I said part of the great work was attaining the Philosopher's Stone? Well, the Philosopher's Stone looks very similar to the Reality Stone that only Wanda procured in WandaVision or Multiverse of Madness. And if you remember, much like the goddess Isis, which could be associated with Babylon, she was able to change reality and bring her husband Vision back to life through Westview, like the Egyptians viewed the West as the land of the dead. Now, of course, you're watching it through programming, so they have a way of altering it to make the story sound more evil and demonic than it actually is, but that's the whole point of the mind control programming. Now, I watched a lecture earlier on someone talking about the similarities between Crowley's OTO and Drake's OVO. But I would think if someone who is a master magician wouldn't make things this easy without making you really think about it. I don't think that he is Crowley exactly, but I do think that what he's doing to complete the great work requires him to rise and become Horus again. And it's by no coincidence here that not only does he hold something that looks very similar to the Holy Grail with the Owl of Wisdom, but also the symbol for OTO looks very similar to the tarot card for the Ace of Cups, which represents wish fulfillment. And the Holy Grail denotes the holy bloodline. And so when you think about people like Crowley taking control of these rites of ancient Egypt, that we don't know if he was actually connected to. Imagine if the great works were in the hands of somebody who was connected to the bloodline. Most people don't really understand that the United States, even though they call it a democracy, is in fact treated like a monarchy. And you can follow Jay-Z's album where he mentions the Magna Carta and the Holy Grail, meaning that the king is not above the law. But it takes a lot of research and time to understand the bondage systems that we've been put through in America. Another thing that I find funny is that I want to focus on the dynamic of relationships. So another person who told Drake that all of this would happen in the rap beef was Eminem, and I've already shown you all the connections that I found between Marshall Mathers and Samuel McGregor Mathers, who is head of the Order of the Golden Dawn, as well as his wife Moina Mathers, who bears a uncanny resemblance to Eminem's ex-wife's sister. So the point that I'm trying to make with this is these couples together attempted to perform the rites of gods to become like them, but they weren't exactly successful. And so imagine someone trying to take on the energy of a god, but they can't quite do it because they're not the originator and they don't come from the bloodline. Things aren't going to necessarily go right all the time. I know that a lot of people, when they see this content, want to run straight to the words evil and demonic. And I think everything should be looked at from a baseline perspective before throwing in those words to really understand what you're looking at. Because even when I've heard people talk about Greek mythology and the worship of different deities, I think they also forget that a lot of these deities also came from ancient Egypt as well. And what a god is merely someone who is able to do something that other people couldn't, that they deemed to be extraordinary. But it was really just being tapped into intuition and understanding the alchemical process. It's about how you use the power once you have it. Now, going back a little bit to Sexy Red and the Whore of Babylon symbolism, she's being used to create this inverted version of what Miss America is. And by America, we're talking about the woman that they call Babylon, or the Scarlet Woman. In Crowley's book, he says Babylon is identified with Binah, or the Tree of Life, the sphere that represents the Great Sea, and such mother goddesses as Isis, Havani, and Maat. Moreover, she represents all physical mothers. Babylon is the great mother, represents matter, a word for which derived from the Latin word for mother. She is the physical mother of each of us, the one who provided us with material flesh to clothe our naked spirits. She is the archetypal mother, the great Yoni, the womb of all that lives through the flowing blood of the Great Sea. And so when I think about the Philosopher's Stone, or the Reality Stone, as you could say, and the alchemical process, it kind of goes back to the story of Harry Potter I told you about. Achieving the highest level of magic to some people can seem very evil if you don't understand what you're looking at, or the creation process of our world and what it looks like. There are people who have intended to use this power for something that is not rooted in purity. But because we're exiting this cycle of destruction, it comes with things like creating an artificial matrix or a reality or a world, one where they are attempting to merge humans with the machine. The only thing that can really save us together is back to that natural creation process that came from Osiris and Isis. Again, Crowley tried to attempt this, but he couldn't. He ended up spending the last of his days alone. However, it's very interesting that Trump has a replica of the Ark of the Covenant, which was a big part of Rosicrucian rites that are connected to the Osiris and Isis story. Most likely, it's an attempt to be godlike. The Ark of the Covenant was a symbol of promise between God and his chosen people. And I've shown you all the connections to St. Louis, particularly this connection between the rapper and women from St. Louis, or Lucy, the light information, the light bearer, or the light bringer, which again may help you realize why they're using Sexy Red's image, this inversion of what the Great Mother is actually supposed to be versus what she is, and why together the themes between her and Trump is essentially the definition of chaos magic.